Clara stood in front of her bedroom mirror with a smile that felt almost girlish. She tilted her head slightly, smoothing her hands down the sides of her fitted cream dress. It wasn't overly dramatic. Daniel always preferred her simple and elegant, as he liked to say, but it hugged her curves in a way she knew he loved. She had paired it with soft gold heels and the necklace he bought her on their second anniversary. "You still look like the girl he fell for," she murmured to her reflection. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of shared breakfasts, late-night arguments about nothing, spontaneous weekend trips, and whispered dreams about children they hadn't yet tried for. Daniel wasn't perfect. He worked too much, traveled constantly, and sometimes forgot important dates. But he always came home to her. At least, that's what she believed. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. A message from Daniel. "Long meeting. Exhausted. Miss you." Her lips curved. "Miss you more. Get some rest," she typed back, smiling to herself. If only he knew. The plan had formed 2 days earlier while she sat alone at their dining table, staring at his empty chair. He had been in Abuja for 2 weeks closing what he described as the biggest deal of his career. He sounded distracted on the phone lately, distant. She told herself it was stress. Still, she missed him, and Clara had always been the romantic one, so she booked a flight without telling him, packed a small overnight bag, called the hotel to confirm his room number under the guise of sending a delivery. She could already imagine it. He would open the door, stunned. "Clara? What are you doing here?" She'd throw her arms around him. Maybe they'd laugh. Maybe he'd spin her around like he used to. Maybe they'd remember who they were before work swallowed him whole. The taxi ride to the airport had felt like a secret adventure. She caught herself grinning at nothing during the flight. Even turbulence couldn't ruin her mood. By the time her plane landed in Abuja, her heart was racing with anticipation. She checked into a nearby hotel first to freshen up, reapplied lipstick, adjusted her hair, sprayed the perfume Daniel once said drove him crazy. "You're ridiculous," she told herself, but she was glowing. Love does that. The ride to Daniel's hotel felt longer than the flight. The building stood tall and polished, glass reflecting the late evening sun. It was one of those luxury hotels businessmen preferred, quiet, discreet, expensive. Perfect for success. Perfect for secrets. She stepped inside, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The air smelled like expensive cologne and polished wood. At the reception desk, she offered her sweetest smile. "I'm here to surprise my husband," she said softly. "Daniel Rhodes. He's staying here." The receptionist hesitated briefly, then checked the system. "Yes, ma'am. Suite 814. Clara's stomach flipped. "Thank you." She didn't ask to be announced. She wanted the surprise to be real. The elevator ride felt endless. Her reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman practically vibrating with excitement. She smoothed her dress again, checked her lipstick once more. When the elevator dinged, her pulse jumped. Floor 8. She walked slowly down the hallway, counting doors. She stood there for a second, hand hovering over the door handle. She imagined his face. She imagined his arms. She imagined the warmth of familiarity. She turned the handle gently. It moved, unlocked. She frowned slightly. Daniel was always cautious. He locked everything. Maybe housekeeping had just left. She pushed the door open quietly. "Daniel?" she called softly, stepping inside. The lights were dim. His suit jacket lay tossed over a chair. His shoes were by the couch. Her smile widened. He was here. She closed the door behind her, heart thudding louder now. And then she heard it. A laugh. Soft. Feminine. Familiar. Her body stiffened. No. Her mind tried to reason. Maybe it was television. Maybe he had a meeting. Maybe. The laugh came again. From the bedroom. And this time she recognized it. Vanessa. Her older sister. Clara's throat went dry. Her feet moved before her brain could stop them. Each step toward the bedroom felt like walking underwater. Heavy. Slow. Unreal. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She reached it, pushed it open, and the world split in two. Daniel was in bed, sheets tangled around his waist. Vanessa was beside him, bare skin, hair messy, comfortable, intimate, not shocked, not startled, comfortable. Clara's overnight bag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. The sound made them turn. For one split second, Daniel's face registered confusion. Then horror. Clara! Vanessa turned more slowly. Her expression didn't hold panic. It held something worse. Resignation. And then calm. "Oh," Vanessa said softly. "So you finally found out." Clara's ears rang. She couldn't breathe. Her eyes darted between them like her brain was trying to rearrange what she was seeing into something logical. This wasn't possible. Not Daniel. Not Vanessa. Her sister. The sister who held her hand when their mother died. The sister who helped her pick her wedding dress. The sister who toasted to forever love at her reception. "What?" Clara's voice cracked. "What is this?" Daniel scrambled out of bed, grabbing for clothes. "It's not what it looks like." Clara laughed. A broken, hollow sound. "It's exactly what it looks like." Vanessa didn't move to cover herself. She leaned back against the headboard as if this were some awkward inconvenience. "You shouldn't have come unannounced," she said coolly. Clara blinked at her. "What?" Vanessa's eyes sharpened. "I met him first." The words landed like a slap. Clara stared. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Before you. Before the engagement. Before the wedding. He and I were talking. We were close." Daniel's voice cut in, panicked. "Vanessa, stop." "No," she snapped at him. Then back to Clara. "You swooped in. Miss Perfect Little Sister. He saw you at that charity event and suddenly I was invisible." Clara's heart pounded painfully in her chest. "You introduced us," she whispered. "Yes," Vanessa said bitterly. "And you stole him." The room spun. "Stole?" Clara repeated. "He was mine first," Vanessa insisted. "You just happened to be more convenient." Daniel finally stepped forward, pulling on his shirt. "This isn't fair," he said. "It wasn't serious back then." Clara's head whipped toward him. "Back then?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was confession enough. "How long?" Clara asked, barely audible. No one answered. Her stomach twisted. "How long?" she screamed. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "It started again 6 months ago." 6 months. Half a year. Half a year of phone calls. Late meetings. Work stress. Half a year of lies. Clara felt something inside her crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like glass under pressure. Vanessa swung her legs off the bed finally, wrapping a sheet around herself. "You were always so sure of him," she said, voice almost mocking. "So proud. So secure." Clara stared at her sister like she was a stranger. "I loved you," Clara whispered. Vanessa's expression flickered, just briefly, but it hardened again. "You loved him," Vanessa corrected. "I just reclaimed what was mine." Daniel stepped closer. "Clara, please, let's talk about this calmly." Calmly, she looked around the room, at the bed, at the sheets, at the man she built her life around, at the sister she trusted blindly, and something inside her snapped fully. She turned. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't beg. She walked, out of the bedroom, out of the suite, down the hallway, into the elevator. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls. But she didn't recognize the woman looking back. The elevator doors opened. She stepped into the lobby. The world felt too bright, too loud. Her chest tightened painfully. She pushed through the hotel doors and into the evening air. Cars rushed by. People moved normally. How could the world continue? How could it not know that hers had just ended? Tears blurred everything. She stepped off the curb without looking. A horn blared. Headlights flashed. And then, impact. The horn was loud. Too loud. But Clara didn't register it as danger. It sounded distant, like something happening in another world. Another life. Her heels slipped slightly on the wet pavement as she stepped off the curb. The evening air in Abuja was thick, heavy with the scent of rain that had fallen earlier. Streetlights blurred into glowing halos through her tears. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She just walked. The headlights hit her first, white and blinding. Then came the screech of tires. Someone shouted. Time slowed in that unnatural way it does just before disaster. Clara turned her head at the last second. She saw a dark sedan. She saw a man behind the wheel. She saw his eyes widen. Then the world exploded. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Her body lifted off the ground in a weightless, surreal second before slamming back onto the asphalt. Pain erupted everywhere at once, sharp, electric, consuming. Her head struck something hard. Sound disappeared. The world went silent. She tasted metal. Her vision flickered between light and shadow. Somewhere far away, people were screaming. But she couldn't tell if it was them or her. The sky above her looked strangely peaceful. A soft, deep blue stretching endlessly. She focused on it because everything else hurt too much. Footsteps pounded toward her. Stay with me. A male voice. Urgent. Close. She tried to move, but her body refused to respond. Felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't see her step out. She just ran into the road. The voice shouted to someone nearby. Hands hovered near her face. Ma'am? Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered. A man leaned over her, mid-30s maybe. Sharp features. Dark hair. Suit jacket thrown open. Panic written across his face. Blood trickled down the side of her temple, warm and sticky. Don't close your eyes, he said firmly. Stay with me. Stay with me. The words felt heavy. Why? What was she staying for? Her mind drifted backward. The hotel room. Vanessa's voice. I met him first. Daniel's face. 6 months. 6 months of lies. Her chest tightened. Not from physical injury, but from the weight of betrayal pressing down on her heart. I'm sorry, she whispered. The man leaned closer. You don't need to apologize. Just stay awake. But she wasn't apologizing to him. She wasn't even sure who she was apologizing to. Maybe herself. For not seeing it. For trusting too deeply. For loving without suspicion. Sirens wailed in the distance. The man carefully slid one hand beneath her head, stabilizing her neck. Ambulance is on the way, he muttered. You're going to be okay. She tried to focus on his face. He looked scared. Genuinely scared. Not annoyed. Not angry. Scared. Why? It was just an accident. She stepped into the road. It was her fault. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. No, maybe it wasn't just the road she stepped into blindly. Maybe it was everything. The sirens grew louder. Flashing red and blue lights painted the street in violent color. Voices layered over each other. Possible head trauma. She's bleeding. Pulse is weak but steady. Hands lifted her carefully onto a stretcher. The movement sent waves of agony through her body. She gasped, the pain finally breaking through the numbness. There we go, someone said gently. Stay with us. The man who had been driving walked beside the stretcher. I'm coming with her, he insisted. You family? A paramedic asked quickly. No. Pause. I'm the driver. The paramedic's eyes flickered. Then yes. Come. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Inside, the world shrank to bright white lights and clinical urgency. A paramedic cut away part of her dress to examine her injuries. Clara would have been embarrassed in another life. In this one, she didn't care. A mask was placed over her nose. Breathe slowly, she tried. Pain radiated from her ribs. Her leg throbbed. Her head felt like it was splitting open. The driver sat at the end of the ambulance bench, watching everything with tight intensity. Do you know her name? A paramedic asked him. He hesitated. No. Clara's eyes fluttered open slightly. My bag, she whispered weakly. The man leaned forward immediately. What about it? Inside. ID. One of the paramedics retrieved it from the belongings bag handed over by bystanders. Clara Rhodes, he read aloud. Rhodes. The name hit her like another blow. Was she still Clara Rhodes? Did she even want to be? The ambulance jolted forward. Clara, the paramedic said gently. Stay with us. The driver repeated it quietly. Clara. Hearing her name from a stranger felt strange. Grounding. The hospital ceiling lights blurred above her as they rushed her through double doors. Head injury. Possible fracture in left leg. Monitor vitals. Someone ordered. Everything moved fast. Too fast. Clara tried to hold on to consciousness, but it kept slipping through her fingers like sand. Through the haze, she saw the driver arguing at the nurse's station. I need updates. You'll have to wait. I'm not leaving. Why wasn't he leaving? Guilt pricked faintly through her foggy mind. He didn't mean to hit her. She stepped into traffic. It wasn't his burden to carry. They wheeled her into a room. Machines beeped. Cold hands cleaned the blood from her temple. She drifted in and out of awareness. At some point, a doctor's voice filtered through. Concussion. Broken tibia. Severe bruising. She's lucky. Lucky. The word felt ironic. Her body felt shattered. Her marriage was shattered. Her trust was shattered. What exactly was lucky? The world faded completely. When she woke again, it was to quiet. Real quiet. Not the chaos of sirens or shouting. Soft beeping from a heart monitor. The sterile smell of antiseptic. Her body felt heavy. Weighted. Her head throbbed, but less violently. She blinked slowly. White ceiling. White walls. Hospital. Memory returned like a wave. Hotel. Vanessa. Daniel. The road. The impact. A tear slipped sideways into her hairline. She turned her head carefully. He was there, sitting in a chair beside her bed. Still in his suit, though the jacket was folded over his arm now. His tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked exhausted, but alert. When he noticed her eyes open, he straightened immediately. You're awake. His voice was softer now, controlled. She swallowed painfully. You? Her throat was dry. I'm Adrian, he said quickly. I was driving the car. She stared at him for a long second. You didn't see the road, he added gently. You ran straight into traffic. No accusation, just fact. Clara closed her eyes briefly. I know. Silence stretched between them. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. You've been unconscious for several hours, he said. They said you'll need surgery for your leg. Nothing life-threatening. Nothing life-threatening. She almost laughed. It felt like everything life-threatening had already happened. Why are you here? She asked faintly. He paused. Because that was the real question. He could have left after the ambulance came. He could have exchanged information and disappeared. Instead, he was still sitting there, waiting. I couldn't just leave, he said finally. Her gaze drifted to the ceiling again. She didn't know why that mattered, but it did. The hospital room felt unfamiliar and strangely safe at the same time, like a pause between two lives. Before tonight. After tonight. Adrian shifted slightly. There's someone we should call, he said gently. Your husband? Family? The word husband felt like glass in her throat. Her chest tightened. Images flashed. Vanessa's smirk. Daniel's guilty face. 6 months. Her stomach churned. No, she whispered. Adrian studied her carefully. No one, he asked softly. She turned her face away. No one. And for the first time since the impact, the tears came freely. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet, steady grief sliding down her cheeks. Adrian didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't offer cliches. He didn't ask questions. He simply reached over, pulled a tissue from the bedside box, and placed it gently in her hand, and stayed. The hospital room felt suspended outside of time. Morning light filtered through the blinds in pale gold stripes, stretching across the white sheets and sterile walls. The beeping of the heart monitor had become a steady rhythm. Predictable, grounding. Clara lay still, staring at the ceiling. Her leg was immobilized in a cast, elevated slightly. Her ribs protested every time she breathed too deeply. Her head felt packed with cotton, thoughts sluggish and heavy from the concussion. But none of that hurt as much as her chest. That ache was deeper, quieter, constant. The chair beside her bed creaked. She didn't have to look to know he was still there. Adrian. The man who hit her. The man who refused to leave. "You should go home," she murmured without turning her head. There was a brief pause before he answered. "I went home." She glanced at him. He looked different in daylight. Less sharp. More human. Dark circles under his eyes. His tie was gone now, replaced by an open collar. He had changed shirts, but he still looked like someone who hadn't slept properly. "You came back," she said. "Yes." He didn't offer an explanation. He didn't need to. Clara studied him for a long second. "Why?" He leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his arms loosely. "Because I don't like unfinished things." She almost smiled. "You consider me unfinished business?" He met her gaze evenly. "I consider you someone who stepped into the road like she didn't care if she made it to the other side." The words weren't harsh. They were careful, accurate. Clara looked away. Outside the window, the city was moving as if nothing had happened. Cars flowing, people walking, life continuing. "I wasn't trying to die," she said quietly. "I know. But I also wasn't trying very hard to live in that moment." The admission settled heavily between them. Adrian didn't respond immediately. He seemed to weigh his words carefully. "What happened?" he asked at last. It wasn't curiosity. It was concern. And somehow that made it harder to answer. Clara swallowed. "I surprised my husband." The words felt strange now, almost naive. Adrian stayed silent. She appreciated that. "I flew in to see him. He's been on a business trip for 2 weeks. Her fingers tightened slightly against the hospital sheet. I thought it would be romantic." Her voice wavered, but she pushed forward. The hotel room was unlocked. Adrian's jaw tightened subtly. "I heard a woman laughing," she continued. "I knew that laugh. I grew up with it." He didn't interrupt. "My sister," she said. The word fractured on the way out. She was in bed with him. The room felt smaller suddenly. The steady beep of the heart monitor sounded louder. Adrian's eyes darkened, not with judgment, but with something protective. "How long?" he asked carefully. 6 months, Clara whispered. "At least." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "That's not a mistake," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "It's a choice." Silence lingered. Clara stared at her hands. "She said she met him before I did. That he was hers first. That I stole him." Adrian's brows drew together. "And do you believe that?" Clara let out a weak laugh. "I introduced them. At a charity event. She was there as my sister. He was there as my date." She closed her eyes briefly. "I built the bridge they used to betray me." Adrian leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Listen to me carefully," he said. Something about his tone made her open her eyes again. "You did not steal a man who chose you, and you did not cause 2 adults to betray you." His voice was calm, firm. "They made their own decisions." Clara's throat tightened. "I should have seen it," she whispered. The late meetings. The phone calls he took outside. The way she stopped visiting as often. "You trusted them," Adrian corrected gently. She blinked back sudden tears. "I trusted the wrong people." "That doesn't make you foolish. It makes you honest." The word hit her unexpectedly. Honest. When was the last time someone described her that way? Not dramatic. Not emotional. Not insecure. Honest. She looked at him differently now. "You talk like you've done this before," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Done what?" "Sat with someone whose life just imploded." A faint, almost reluctant smile touched his mouth. "I'm a lawyer." That surprised her. "What kind?" "Litigation. Contracts. Divorce." The last word hung in the air. Clara let out a hollow sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course you are." He tilted his head slightly. "Why does that sound like fate being cruel?" "Because that's exactly what I need." They held each other's gaze for a long second. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was understanding. "Are you going to file?" he asked gently. Clara didn't hesitate. "Yes." The answer felt solid. Certain. For the first time since the hotel room, something inside her felt steady. Adrian nodded once. "Good." She studied him carefully. "You don't even know me. I don't need to know you deserve better than that." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. No one had said that. Not since she left the hotel. Not in the chaos. Not in the hospital. No one had centered her pain. They'd centered the accident. The inconvenience. The scandal. But not her. "Does it get ugly?" she asked quietly. "Divorce?" "Yes." He didn't sugarcoat it. "It can." "How ugly?" "That depends on how much he wants to protect his image." Clara's jaw tightened. "He cares about reputation, status, appearances." Adrian nodded slowly. "Then it may become a war." The word didn't scare her the way she thought it would. Maybe she was too broken to feel fear properly. "Will I survive it?" she asked. He didn't smile. He didn't soften it. "Yes." The certainty in his voice did something strange to her insides. She believed him. A nurse entered the room briefly, checking vitals, adjusting 4 lines, speaking in gentle professional tones. Clara answered automatically, her mind still half with Adrian. When the nurse left, the room felt quiet again. "You should call someone," Adrian said carefully. "Even if not your husband. A friend. Family." Clara hesitated. "My parents passed away years ago," she said. "And my sister." Her voice faded. Adrian nodded once. "I have a cousin," she added after a moment. "But I don't want to explain yet." "You don't have to," he said. Another silence settled, but this one wasn't heavy. Felt thoughtful. "You stayed all night," she said eventually. "Yes." "Why?" He looked almost annoyed by the question. "Because you were alone." It was such a simple answer. So unadorned. So different from the complicated lies she had just uncovered in her marriage. She studied him carefully. "Are you always like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "Stubbornly decent." That made him actually smile this time. "Only when necessary." Her lips curved faintly in response. Felt strange. Smiling in a hospital bed. After everything. But the feeling wasn't painful. It was small. Gentle. Like the first crack of light under a closed door. Her eyelids began to grow heavy again. The medication was pulling her back under. "Adrian?" she murmured softly. "Yes. If I decide to fight this, you won't be alone." The promise wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't loaded. It was steady. And for the first time since the accident, since the hotel room, since the world tilted sideways, Clara felt something unfamiliar but welcome settle into her chest. Not love. Not hope. Not yet. But support. And sometimes, in the beginning of rebuilding a shattered life, that's enough. The days after surgery blurred together in a haze of medication, physical pain, and long stretches of silence. Clara learned quickly that healing was not dramatic. It was slow, uncomfortable, frustrating. Her leg was wrapped in a heavy cast from thigh to ankle. Her ribs still ached when she shifted even slightly. The concussion left her thoughts foggy, like she was walking through a dream she couldn't fully wake from. But Adrian kept showing up. Morning, evening, sometimes both. He never stayed too long. Never intruded. He would knock lightly before entering, as if she might suddenly decide she needed privacy, and he would respect that without question. On the 4th day he brought coffee. Not hospital coffee. Real coffee. The smell hit her first. Rich, warm, grounding. She was sitting upright for the first time, pillows stacked behind her back. A tray of untouched hospital food sat nearby. "You look more alive today," he said casually as he set the coffee on the small table beside her bed. "That's because I've decided not to die," she replied dryly. His mouth twitched. "I'm relieved." He handed her the cup carefully. "Decaf. Doctor's orders." She stared at it suspiciously. "I could use the caffeine." You could use not raising your blood pressure. She took a small sip, tasted like normal life, and something inside her chest tightened unexpectedly. I didn't thank you, she said after a moment. For what? For staying. He shrugged slightly. You would have done the same. She didn't answer that, because she wasn't sure. Would she have? Before this week, yes. Now, she didn't know who she was anymore. Adrian pulled the chair closer and sat. Have you spoken to him? He asked gently. Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. No. Her phone had been sitting in the drawer beside her bed since the accident. She hadn't touched it. Didn't want to. The idea of seeing Daniel's name on the screen made her stomach turn. He's called, Adrian added carefully. Her eyes snapped up. How do you know? He's listed as your emergency contact. The hospital notified him. Her throat went dry. And he's been asking to visit. Her jaw clenched. Did you tell them to let him in? No, Adrian said calmly. I told them you were resting. Relief washed through her in a wave so strong it almost embarrassed her. Thank you. He studied her for a long moment. You don't owe him a conversation until you're ready, he said. Clara stared at the coffee in her hands. I don't think I'll ever be ready. Silence settled. Not awkward, just present. Adrian leaned back slightly. Tell me what happened, he said softly. She hesitated. I already did. You told me the outline. I want the story. She looked at him sharply. Why? Because stories matter, he said simply. Details matter. She understood then. The lawyer in him was listening, collecting, but it didn't feel manipulative. Felt steady, like someone preparing to build a case around her pain instead of dismissing it. Clara inhaled slowly. I thought he was distant because of work, she began. Her voice was stronger this time. He stopped answering my calls right away, said meetings ran late. He started traveling more often. She swallowed. I blamed myself. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. For what? For not being exciting enough, she admitted quietly. For gaining weight. For being predictable. His jaw tightened. That's not how infidelity works. It felt like it was. She shifted slightly, wincing at the discomfort in her ribs. I tried harder, she continued. Cooked his favorite meals when he was home. Bought new clothes. Suggested date nights. And he said I was overthinking. A bitter laugh escaped her. I was overthinking while he was sleeping with my sister. Adrian didn't interrupt. Didn't soften the truth. He just let it sit. The night I went to surprise him, she continued, voice thinning slightly. I was excited, nervous. I thought maybe we needed that spark again. Her eyes grew distant. The door wasn't locked. She could see it again. The dim lights, the jacket over the chair, the laugh. I knew her voice instantly, she said, but my brain refused to process it. She paused. It's strange how denial works, even when the truth is standing naked in front of you. Adrian exhaled quietly. She wasn't ashamed, Clara whispered. That's what hurt the most. She looked at him. She wasn't caught. She was confident. His expression darkened. What exactly did she say? Clara hesitated. She said she met him before I did. That he was hers first. Was that true? They spoke casually before we met, Clara admitted. Nothing serious. At least that's what Daniel told me when we started dating. And you believed him? Yes. She stared at her hands. I trusted them both. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Trust is not a weakness. Clara looked at him sharply. It feels like one. It isn't. His voice was calm but firm. Betrayal says something about the person who commits it, not the one who trusted. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, he replied. But it's true. Silence stretched. Clara's voice softened. She looked at me like I had stolen something from her. And did you? No. The answer came instantly. She shook her head. I didn't even know. Adrian nodded once. Then you didn't steal anything. He chose you. And then he chose her, she said. Yes, Adrian agreed quietly. But that's on him. Her throat tightened again. The anger was finally starting to replace the shock. He lied to my face for 6 months, she whispered. And that's why you're filing for divorce, Adrian said evenly. She looked at him. You really think I should? It wasn't a question. It was a need for confirmation. He didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because you don't recover from that level of deception by pretending it didn't happen. She studied him carefully. And if he begs? Will that erase it? No. Then there's your answer. She leaned back into her pillows. It was strange. How clear he made things feel. Not easier, but clearer. Will it be ugly? She asked again. He held her gaze. If he fights it, yes. And if he doesn't? Then it'll be quick. She almost laughed. He won't go quietly. Adrian's expression shifted slightly. Then we prepare. The word we hung in the air. She noticed it. He didn't correct it. You'd represent me? She asked. I would. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Because I don't like injustice, he said. Then softer. And because you deserve someone in your corner. Something inside her chest warmed unexpectedly. Not romance. Not yet. But safety. She set the coffee aside. I feel embarrassed, she admitted. Why? Because everyone will know. He nodded slowly. They might. My family. Our friends. Social media. He didn't sugarcoat it. There may be noise. She closed her eyes briefly. I hate being pitted. Then don't be, he said calmly. Her eyes opened. That's not how it works. It can be. He leaned forward slightly. You weren't the one in that bed cheating. You weren't the one lying. There is no shame in being wronged. The conviction in his voice made something shift inside her. For days she had been drowning in humiliation. Now, for the first time, she felt anger rising stronger than shame. I want my life back, she said quietly. Adrian nodded. Then we start rebuilding. She studied him carefully. You talk like this is a case. It is. She raised an eyebrow. My marriage. Yes. His gaze didn't waver. It's a breach of contract. Emotional and financial. She stared at him. And then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A real laugh. Soft but genuine. There it is, she said. The lawyer. He allowed himself a small smile. I warned you. The room felt lighter somehow. Not because the pain was gone, but because she wasn't carrying it alone in that moment. Her eyelids grew heavy again, the medication creeping back. Adrian? She murmured softly. Yes. If I change my mind. You won't, he said gently. She blinked at him. How do you know? Because you didn't step into traffic to die, he said. You stepped into traffic because something in you broke. He held her gaze steadily. And broken things can be rebuilt. She stared at him. For the first time since the hotel room, since the accident, since everything shattered, she believed that might be true. And for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely alone. Clara didn't cry the day she filed for divorce. She expected to. She thought her hand would tremble when she signed the papers, that her chest would tighten, that grief would rush in like a storm. Instead, she felt something else. Clarity. Adrian's office overlooked the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood floors, shelves lined with law books that looked both decorative and intimidating. It smelled faintly of leather and fresh paper. Clara sat across from him, her legs still in a brace but healing steadily. Physical therapy had started 2 weeks ago. The bruises were fading. The concussion fog had lifted. Her heart, however, was still tender. Adrian slid the document across the desk. Petition for dissolution of marriage, he said calmly. Such clinical language. For something that felt like emotional demolition. Grounds? She asked. Adultery. Emotional distress. Financial misconduct. If we confirm what I suspect. She looked up sharply. What do you suspect? He didn't answer immediately. Daniel transferred a significant amount of money into an account that isn't joint. Her stomach twisted. How significant? Significant enough to suggest concealment. A bitter laugh escaped her. Of course. She shouldn't have been surprised. If he could share her sister's bed, he could hide money too. Adrian leaned back slightly. This won't be simple. I don't want simple, she replied. He studied her carefully. I want fair. That made his eyes soften almost imperceptibly. Fair then. She picked up the pen. For a split second, her mind flashed to her wedding day. White dress. Daniel smiling at the altar. Vanessa in the front row wiping tears. Her parents gone, but their memory present. She remembered believing in forever. She signed her name, Clara Rhodes. The ink dried quickly. She stared at it. That name won't be mine much longer, she murmured. Do you want it to be? Adrian asked. She thought about it. About reclaiming her maiden name. About shedding everything connected to Daniel. Yes, she said finally. Adrian nodded once. Then we'll request it in the filing. He gathered the papers neatly. I'll have him served tomorrow. Clara exhaled slowly. So this is it. This is it. Daniel called that evening. She stared at her phone for a long time before answering. Clara, he breathed the moment she picked up. Why am I being served divorce papers? Because you were sleeping with my sister, she wanted to say. Instead, she replied evenly, you know why. Pause. Can we talk about this privately? We're talking now. Not like this. She closed her eyes briefly. You had 6 months to talk to me privately. Silence. Then frustration edged into his tone. You're overreacting. The words hit like gasoline on flame. Overreacting? She repeated softly. It was a mistake. A mistake lasts one night. Not 6 months. He exhaled sharply. You don't understand. No, she agreed. I don't understand how you could betray me with my own sister. His voice dropped lower. Vanessa and I had history. And I was your wife. Silence again. Then, if you do this, it'll get messy. Clara almost smiled. It was exactly what Adrian predicted. It already is, she said. And she hung up. The scandal moved faster than she expected. Within days, whispers began. A mutual friend texted her cautiously. Is it true? Someone else sent a message that sounded sympathetic but was dripping with curiosity. I heard something about you and Daniel. She ignored most of them. But social media didn't ignore her. A photo surfaced. Daniel and Vanessa at a private dinner months ago. It had been posted casually back then. Now it was being shared with speculation. Power couple? Someone had captioned it sarcastically. Clara felt exposed. Like her humiliation was public entertainment. She sat in Adrian's office again 3 days later, phone in hand. It's spreading, she said quietly. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. Let them talk. That's easy for you to say. I'm not the one in the story. No, she agreed softly. You're not. He leaned forward slightly. Clara, listen to me. Noise is temporary. Legal outcomes are permanent. She stared at him. They're painting me as unstable. Who is they? Daniel's friends. His colleagues. His expression hardened. Good. She blinked. Good. Yes. Why would that be good? Because it shows they're nervous. She studied him carefully. Nervous people make mistakes. Her heart beat a little faster. You really think we can win this? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The first court hearing was brutal. Clara wore a simple navy dress. Minimal makeup. No jewelry except small studs. She refused to look fragile. When she entered the courtroom, conversations dipped slightly. Daniel was already seated at the opposite table. He looked polished, confident. Vanessa sat behind him. Their eyes met. Vanessa didn't look ashamed. She looked defensive. Clara felt something inside her shift permanently. Adrian leaned toward her slightly. Remember, he murmured. Truth doesn't need theatrics. She nodded. Daniel's lawyer stood first. They framed the affair as a lapse in judgment. They implied Clara had been emotionally distant. They suggested marital strain long before Vanessa re-entered the picture. Clara's nails dug into her palm. Adrian stood slowly when it was his turn. Calm. Measured. Your Honor, he began. This was not a lapse. This was a sustained deception. He presented hotel records, phone logs, financial transfers, dates and times, patterns. Each piece landed with quiet precision. Clara watched Daniel's confidence falter slightly. Then came the worst part. Cross-examination. Daniel's lawyer questioned her character. Mrs. Rhodes, were you aware your husband felt neglected? She kept her voice steady. No. Did you ever refuse intimacy? Adrian stood immediately. Objection. Relevance. Sustained. The judge's voice cut sharply. Clara's heart pounded. The lawyer tried again. Isn't it true you've struggled with insecurity? Clara met his gaze directly. It's true I trusted my husband. A murmur rippled faintly through the room. Adrian didn't smile, but she saw the approval in his eyes. When the session adjourned, Daniel avoided looking at her. Vanessa did not. As Clara exited the courthouse, cameras flashed. Mrs. Rhodes, is it true the affair lasted 6 months? Did your sister apologize? Are you seeking full asset division? Adrian stepped slightly in front of her. No comment, he said firmly. He guided her toward the car, shielding her from the chaos. Once inside, the door closed out the noise. Clara's hands began to shake. Adrian noticed immediately. Breathe, he said gently. She did. Inhale. Exhale. That was worse than the accident, she whispered. No, he said quietly. That was you standing up. She looked at him. You think so? I know so. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. You didn't have to object that quickly, she said softly. Yes, I did. Why? Because no one gets to rewrite your pain as your fault. The words sank deep. Something warm stirred in her chest. Not romance. Not yet. But trust. A dangerous, fragile beginning of it. Are you ready for the next round? He asked gently. She thought about it. About the whispers. About Vanessa's stare. About Daniel's attempt to minimize betrayal into a lapse. Her spine straightened. Yes. Adrian nodded once. Then we proceed. As they drove away from the courthouse, Clara looked out at the city passing by. A month ago, she stepped into traffic because her world collapsed. Now she was stepping into battle because she refused to stay broken. And this time, she wasn't alone. War, Clara discovered, wasn't constant explosions. It was waiting. Waiting for court dates. Waiting for documents. Waiting for statements. Waiting for the next blow. And in the spaces between the legal firestorms, there was something else. Silence. It was in that silence that healing began. Physical therapy hurt more than she expected. Her leg had healed structurally, but movement was another battle entirely. The first time the therapist asked her to put weight on it, her body resisted instinctively. It's healed, the therapist said gently. Your brain just doesn't trust it yet. Clara almost laughed. That felt familiar. She gripped the parallel bars and took one careful step. Pain shot up her leg. Not unbearable, but sharp. You're not broken, the therapist added. You're rebuilding. The words echoed in her mind long after she left the clinic. That evening, Adrian picked her up instead of sending a driver. You don't have to keep doing this, she told him as she eased into the passenger seat. I know, he said simply. That was his way. No grand declarations. No dramatic reassurances. Just steady presence. They drove in comfortable silence at first. The city lights flickered on as dusk settled, painting everything in soft gold and shadow. How bad was it? He asked finally. The therapy? She nodded. Bad enough that I wanted to quit. But you didn't. No. He glanced at her briefly. Why? She thought about it. Because quitting would mean admitting I'm fragile. He didn't answer right away. Fragile isn't weak, he said after a moment. It just means something cracked. She stared out the window. I don't want to be cracked anymore. You won't always be. His voice was quiet, certain. She found comfort in that certainty more than she wanted to admit. The second court hearing was harsher. Daniel's team pushed harder, suggested Clara's emotional instability contributed to marital strain, subtly implied the accident itself was evidence of her impulsiveness. It was calculated, cruel. Afterward, Clara locked herself in her bathroom at home and stared at her reflection. Was she unstable? Had she missed signs because she was too consumed with her own fears? The doubt was toxic. It seeped in slowly. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. She hesitated before answering. Hey! His voice immediately shifted. What happened? She hated that he could hear it. They made it sound like I drove him away, she said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, Clara. Her name in his voice felt grounding. Cheating is not a response to being driven away, he continued calmly. It's a decision. She leaned against the sink. I keep replaying everything. That's normal. What if I missed something obvious? You trusted your husband, he said firmly. That's not a flaw. Her voice cracked slightly. I feel humiliated. I know. The softness in his tone undid her. She slid down to sit on the bathroom floor, back against the wall. I don't know how to walk into another courtroom and sit across from them. You don't have to do it alone. I know. But this time her voice was different. Quieter. Less defensive. He didn't fill the silence. He let her breathe. I'm coming over, he said finally. You don't have to. I know. That familiar response again. She didn't argue. When he arrived, he didn't bring case files. He brought food. And silence. They sat at her dining table, plates between them, untouched at first. The house still felt too big, too echoing. Daniel's absence lingered in corners like a ghost. Adrian glanced around subtly. You're thinking about selling it, he observed. She blinked. How did you know? Because this place carries weight. She swallowed. It was supposed to be our forever house. He didn't say it still can be. He didn't offer false hope. Then maybe it shouldn't be, he said instead. They ate slowly. At some point, the conversation shifted from court to ordinary things. Music, books, childhood memories. She learned he grew up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. That he put himself through law school. That he hated dishonesty more than anything. I've seen too many people destroyed by someone else's selfishness, he said quietly. She studied him differently then. You take this personally, she observed. I take injustice personally. The air between them felt heavier, charged. Not romantic. Not yet, but aware. After dinner, he helped her clear the table. She insisted she could manage. He insisted right back. When she nearly lost her balance reaching for a cabinet, his hand shot out instinctively to steady her. His palm wrapped around her waist. Warm, firm, protective. They froze. Her breath caught. His eyes met hers. The moment stretched. Neither of them moved. She could feel his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt. Or maybe it was hers. It was hard to tell. Slowly, carefully, he stepped back. You okay? He asked, voice lower now. Yes. But it came out softer than she intended. They both felt it. The shift. Something unspoken. Something dangerous. He left shortly after. And Clara lay awake longer than usual that night. Not thinking about Daniel. Not thinking about Vanessa. Thinking about the way Adrian's hand felt at her waist. Steady. Safe. The media storm intensified briefly after leaked financial documents surfaced. Daniel had been moving money into an account under Vanessa's name. The public narrative shifted. Sympathy tilted toward Clara. But it didn't feel like victory. Felt exhausting. One evening they sat by the ocean. Adrian had suggested it impulsively after a brutal deposition session. You need air, he said. The waves crashed steadily against the shore, relentless but rhythmic. Clara wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. I hate that my pain became entertainment, she said quietly. He nodded. People consume drama. They don't consider the cost. She stared at the horizon. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. He looked at her. Doing what? Showing up. Staying late. Taking my calls at midnight. He hesitated. For the case. She raised an eyebrow. Try again. A faint smile touched his lips. Because someone should. She waited. And because... He continued more quietly. I care. The words settled between them like something fragile. Her heart stuttered. This is complicated. She whispered. Yes. I'm still legally married. Yes. I'm still healing. I know. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach for her. He just sat there, present. And that restraint made it worse. Or better. She wasn't sure. I don't want to be someone who jumps from one man to another, she said honestly. You won't be. How do you know? Because you're not that kind of person. His confidence in her felt intimate. More intimate than touch. She turned toward him fully. The wind tugged gently at her hair. What kind of person am I? She asked softly. He looked at her for a long moment. You're loyal. Maybe to a fault. But you don't love lightly. Her chest tightened. And you? He exhaled slowly. I don't start something unless I intend to finish it. The weight of that sentence lingered. She looked down at her hands. I'm scared, she admitted. Of him? No. She looked back at him. Of feeling again. His gaze softened. Feeling isn't the enemy, he said quietly. Ignoring it is. Silence fell. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. Then she did something small. She reached for his hand. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Just connection. He looked down at their joined hands. Then back at her. And he didn't let go. The war wasn't over. The divorce wasn't finalized. The scandal still lingered. But somewhere between courtrooms and physical therapy, between anger and exhaustion, between betrayal and rebuilding, Clara realized something. Her heart wasn't just healing. It was waking up. And this time, it wasn't rushing blindly into traffic. It was learning how to walk again. The morning of the final hearing felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but sharper. Clara stood in front of her mirror adjusting the collar of her blouse. It was white, clean, structured. She paired it with a charcoal pencil skirt and low heels she could now walk in without pain. Her legs still ached sometimes, especially when the weather changed. But today she stood steady. She didn't look like a woman dragged through scandal. She looked composed. And that mattered. Her phone buzzed. I'm outside. Adrian. She allowed herself one deep breath before grabbing her bag and heading out. When she stepped into the car, Adrian studied her briefly. You ready? He asked. Yes. He nodded once. But he didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he said quietly, no matter what happens today, you already survived the worst of it. She looked at him. You sound very certain. I am. That calm conviction again. It settled her nerves better than any reassurance could. He drove toward the courthouse, and Clara watched the city pass by, remembering the first time she'd walked into this building. Heart pounding, knees weak, humiliation sitting heavy in her chest. Today felt different. Today felt like closure. The courtroom was crowded. Whispers rippled when she entered. She ignored them. Daniel was already seated. He looked thinner, more tired. The confident shine he wore during the first hearing had dulled. Vanessa sat behind him again. Their eyes met briefly. Vanessa looked uneasy, not defiant, not smug, uneasy. Clara didn't look away this time. She simply held her gaze, then took her seat beside Adrian. Final arguments, the judge announced. Daniel's lawyer stood first. They shifted strategy, no longer minimizing the affair, now framing it as mutual emotional distance. They argued for equal division of assets. They suggested reconciliation had once been possible, but Clara was unwilling to communicate. Clara felt the familiar flicker of anger, but she didn't react. Adrian had prepared her for this. When it was his turn, he rose slowly, measured, controlled. Your Honor, he began. This case is not about emotional distance. His voice carried evenly across the room. It is about deception. He walked deliberately toward the center. For 6 months, the defendant maintained a secret relationship with his wife's sister. During that same period, he transferred substantial marital funds into a private account under that sister's name. The courtroom stirred faintly. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This was not confusion. It was concealment. He presented timelines, bank statements, messages, hotel records, each fact placed carefully, like bricks building an undeniable structure. Then he turned slightly. My client did not step into this courtroom seeking revenge. She stepped in seeking dignity. Clara's breath caught. She did not create this scandal. She endured it. Silence thickened. And she deserves to walk away not punished for someone else's betrayal. Adrian returned to his seat. Clara's heart was pounding. But not from fear. From something else. Validation. When the judge called her to the stand one final time, she rose carefully. The room felt smaller. Closer. Mrs. Rhodes, the judge said calmly, do you wish to make a final statement? She hadn't planned to. Adrian had told her she didn't need to. But she surprised herself. Yes, Your Honor. She stood straight. Daniel avoided her eyes. Vanessa looked pale. Clara inhaled slowly. I loved my husband, she began. Her voice was steady. I trusted my sister. She paused. That trust was broken. Not by misunderstanding. Not by miscommunication. But by choice. The room was silent enough to hear her breathing. I am not here because I failed as a wife. I am here because I refused to accept betrayal as my responsibility. Her gaze shifted briefly toward Daniel. Then Vanessa. Then back to the judge. I am not asking for sympathy. Only fairness. She stepped down. Her hands were trembling slightly as she sat. Adrian leaned closer. You did well, he murmured. She nodded faintly. The judge reviewed documents quietly for several long minutes. Each second felt suspended. Then, in light of the evidence presented, the judge began. The court grants dissolution of marriage. Clara's heart skipped. Given the documented financial concealment and proven infidelity, the court awards primary asset division in favor of the plaintiff. A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel stiffened visibly. Vanessa's face drained of color. Clara didn't react outwardly. She simply listened. The plaintiff may also resume her maiden name upon request. It was done. Just like that. 3 years reduced to legal language and finality. The gavel struck, and Clara felt something release inside her. Not joy. Not triumph. Release. Daniel stood abruptly. This is unfair, he snapped under his breath. Adrian rose calmly. It's lawful. Daniel's jaw tightened. You ruined everything, he muttered toward Clara. She met his gaze evenly. No, she said quietly. You did. Vanessa stood but didn't speak. For the first time since the hotel room, Clara saw something break in her sister's eyes. Regret. But it came too late. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed again. But this time Clara didn't feel small. Adrian walked beside her, not shielding her, but present. Mrs. Rhodes, how do you feel about the ruling? She paused, then answered simply, free, and kept walking. They didn't go back to the office. Instead, Adrian drove aimlessly at first. No destination, just movement. Finally, he pulled into a quiet overlook above the city. The skyline stretched beneath them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara exhaled slowly. It's over. Yes. She looked at her hands. They were steady. I thought I would feel devastated. And I feel lighter. He nodded. That's what happens when you stop carrying what wasn't yours. She turned to him. You never doubted me. Not once. Why? He held her gaze. Because liars leave patterns. And you never did. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. The sun dipped lower, painting everything in warm amber. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For standing with me. He studied her. I told you, you wouldn't be alone. Silence stretched between them again. But it felt different now. charged, alive. She reached for his hand instinctively. He didn't hesitate this time. Their fingers intertwined naturally. No uncertainty, no awkwardness, just connection. Now what? She asked quietly. He looked at her. Now you rebuild. And you? Faint smile. I stay. Her heart skipped. This is where it gets complicated, she murmured. It doesn't have to be. She searched his face. Are you sure? Yes. The certainty in him steadied her. He didn't rush. He didn't claim. He simply held her hand and let the moment breathe. Clara looked out over the city one last time. She had walked into traffic because her world collapsed. She had walked into court because she refused to stay broken. Now she stood at the edge of something new. Not rebound. Not desperation. Something earned. She turned toward Adrian slowly. Dinner? She asked softly. He smiled. Dinner. And for the first time, the next step in her life wasn't about escaping pain. It was about choosing something better. And this time, she chose with open eyes. Freedom felt strange at first. Clara had imagined the finalization of her divorce would feel explosive, like fireworks or a dramatic emotional release. Instead, it felt like standing in an empty room after furniture had been removed. Quiet, echoing, unfurnished. The house she once shared with Daniel was sold within 2 months. She didn't fight to keep it. She didn't want to. Too many ghosts lived in those walls. She moved into a smaller place across the city. Modern, bright, neutral walls. No memories attached. The first night she slept there, she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar silence. No footsteps in another room. No distant television noise. No tension. Just stillness. It should have felt lonely, but it didn't. Felt clean. Adrian didn't rush her. That was the difference. He didn't suddenly fill her calendar or claim space in her home. He didn't start leaving toothbrushes or hinting at permanence. He asked, dinner Friday? Walk Sunday morning? Coffee after your therapy session? Every invitation felt intentional, respectful, and that respect made it easier to say yes. Their first official date didn't feel like a date. It was simple, an outdoor cafe tucked along a quiet street. Clara wore a soft blue dress. Nothing dramatic. Adrian arrived in a charcoal blazer, sleeves slightly rolled. He stood when she approached. Not out of formality, out of instinct. She noticed. I feel like we skipped steps, she said lightly as she sat. How so? You've seen me at my worst. Hospital bed. Courtroom breakdowns. He tilted his head slightly. I've never seen you at your worst. She blinked. What? I've seen you hurt. I've seen you angry. I've seen you exhausted. His eyes held hers steadily. But I've never seen you small. Her throat tightened. That did something to her. They talked about ordinary things. Books she used to love but stopped reading during her marriage. His childhood in a cramped apartment with a mother who believed discipline solved everything. She laughed more than she expected to. At one point, she caught herself mid-laugh and froze. What? He asked gently. I forgot I could still do that. Do what? Feel normal. His expression softened. You are normal. She studied him. You're dangerously steady. A faint smile curved his mouth. Is that a complaint? No, she admitted. It's unfamiliar. He leaned back slightly. Chaos can feel like passion when you're used to it. She looked at him carefully. And this is calm. The word lingered. Calm. She wasn't sure she had ever chosen calm before. Weeks passed. The scandal faded. Public attention shifted to something newer, louder. Clara resumed pieces of her old life. She returned to work gradually. Met with friends she had avoided during the legal battle. Some were awkward. Some were genuine. A few apologized for doubting her. She accepted quietly. Healing didn't require revenge. It required forward motion. Adrian remained present but never intrusive. One evening, he came over to help her assemble a bookshelf she had ordered online. The instructions were unnecessarily complicated. This is clearly written by someone who hates humanity, he muttered as he examined the diagram. She laughed. I thought lawyers were good with fine print. Fine print, yes. Swedish furniture puzzles, no. They worked side by side on the living room floor. At some point, their hands brushed reaching for the same screw. They both paused. A flicker passed between them. Not urgency. Awareness. Clara swallowed. This part, she said softly, is the scary one. Building furniture? She gave him a look. You know what I mean. He sat back on his heels. Yes. Silence. I don't want to be a rebound, she said honestly. You're not. I don't want you to feel like you saved me. I didn't. She looked at him. You stood by me. That's not saving, he replied calmly. That's choosing. The distinction mattered. She shifted slightly closer without thinking. Are you sure you're not just protective? He studied her carefully. I am protective. Her heart stuttered. But that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed gently against her cheek. Not claiming. Asking. I'm here because I like who you are when you're not hurting. Her breath caught. And who am I? You're thoughtful. Loyal. Quietly stubborn. You overthink everything and still choose kindness. She stared at him. You see all that? Yes. And you still want this? Yes. No hesitation. No drama. Just certainty. That steadiness again. It was disarming. Dangerous. Comforting. All at once. She leaned forward first. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't fueled by loneliness. It was careful. Soft. Deliberate. When they pulled apart, neither spoke immediately. How does that feel? He asked quietly. She considered. Not like a mistake. A small smile touched his lips. Good. Months passed. They built something slow. Intentional. Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers. Late-night phone calls about nothing. Shared grocery runs that somehow felt intimate. There were moments of doubt. Once, Clara froze when his phone buzzed late at night. Her body reacted before her mind did. He noticed immediately. You want to check it? He asked calmly. She flushed. No. He handed it to her anyway. She looked at the screen. Client email. Nothing more. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't apologize for healing, he replied. She realized then how trauma lingers in the body, how trust rebuilds brick by brick. One evening, they sat on her balcony watching the city lights flicker below. I don't want to rush you, he said quietly. You're not. I mean it. She turned toward him. I don't feel rushed. He studied her face carefully. I care about you. The words were simple, heavy. She didn't look away. I care about you too. Saying it felt different this time. Not fragile. Not uncertain. Real. He reached for her hand. Whatever this becomes, he said softly. It's not built on pain. She squeezed his fingers gently. It's built on choice. Yes. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, her heart didn't feel like it was bracing for impact. Felt open. Not reckless. Not blind. Open. And she realized something quietly profound. Love after ruin doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like safety. Like someone who stays when there's nothing dramatic happening. Like laughter over badly assembled furniture. Like calm. And this time, she wasn't falling. She was walking into it. It was raining the night Clara got the call. Not a violent storm. Just steady rain. Soft but relentless. Tapping against her balcony doors while she and Adrian sat on the couch reviewing guest lists for a small engagement dinner they were planning. The word still felt new. Engagement. 3 weeks earlier, Adrian had proposed quietly on that same balcony. No grand spectacle. No crowd. Just the city lights below and a simple ring he slid onto her finger with steady hands. I don't want to rush your healing, he had said. But I don't want to pretend I don't know what I want either. She had said yes without hesitation. Now, as rain streaked the glass, her phone buzzed across the coffee table. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Something made her answer. Hello. A pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in months. Auntie Clara? Her stomach dropped. It was Vanessa's daughter. Her niece. Amara? Clara sat upright. What's wrong? The girl's breathing was uneven. There's been an accident. The words echoed. Clara's hand tightened around the phone. Who? Mom and Uncle Daniel. Uncle. The word hit strangely. Her pulse quickened. What happened? They were driving back from a party. It was raining. The car. It flipped. Rain. Headlights. Impact. For a split second, Clara felt like she was back in the street outside the hotel. Where are they? She asked quietly. City General Hospital. The same hospital. Her chest tightened. And Daniel? She forced herself to ask. There was a long silence on the other end. He didn't make it. The world went quiet. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a sudden vacuum of sound. And your mom? Clara asked carefully. She's alive. Another pause. But they said she can't feel her legs. Clara closed her eyes. A strange mix of emotions surged through her. Shock, sadness, something dangerously close to pity. I'm coming, she said. The drive to the hospital was silent. Adrian didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't tell her what to feel. He just drove. You don't have to go in alone, he said gently when they parked. I know. She stepped out into the rain. The hospital doors felt too familiar, too cyclical. Life really did have a cruel sense of symmetry. Inside, the air smelled the same, antiseptic and fluorescent lighting. A nurse directed her to the intensive care wing. Amara stood outside the room, eyes red, shoulders trembling. When she saw Clara, she ran into her arms. I didn't know who else to call, she sobbed. Clara held her tightly. It's okay, she whispered, and she meant it. It wasn't the time for history. It was the time for humanity. Daniel's body had already been moved. Clara didn't ask to see him. She didn't need that image. Whatever closure existed had already happened in a courtroom months ago. Instead, she turned toward Vanessa's room. Her steps slowed. Adrian's hand brushed lightly against her back. I'm right here, he murmured. She nodded and stepped inside. Vanessa looked smaller somehow, weaker. The confidence that once sharpened her features was gone. Machines beeped steadily around her bed. Her lower body was covered by a blanket, motionless. Vanessa's eyes shifted when she heard the door. For a second, confusion crossed her face. Then recognition. Clara. Emotion flickered there. Shock. Shame. Something broken. You came, Vanessa whispered. Her voice was fragile. Clara stood still at the foot of the bed. Yes. Vanessa's throat moved as she swallowed. Daniel. He's gone, Clara said gently. Tears pooled instantly in Vanessa's eyes. I didn't mean for any of this, she whispered. Clara studied her sister, the woman who once stood confidently in a hotel room wrapped in betrayal. Now she couldn't move her legs. Life had shifted violently. Was he drunk? Clara asked quietly. Vanessa hesitated. Yes. The word hung heavy. Why were you with him? Clara asked. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Because I thought if I kept choosing him, it would justify everything. Clara absorbed that slowly. Did it? Vanessa's lips trembled. No. Silence filled the room. Rain tapped faintly against the window. I lost him, Vanessa whispered. And I lost you. Clara's chest tightened. I never meant to hurt you, Vanessa continued. I told myself stories to make it easier. That he was mine first. That you took something from me. Her voice broke. But I was jealous. You were always steady. Loved. Certain. Clara felt something soften inside her. You chose him, she said quietly. Yes. And he chose you. Vanessa nodded weakly. And now he's gone. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Death complicated anger. It stripped it of sharp edges. You can't feel your legs? Clara asked gently. Vanessa shook her head. They said spinal cord damage. They don't know if it's permanent. The fear in her eyes was raw. For the first time, Clara saw her sister not as a rival, not as a betrayer, but as someone terrified. "I'm sorry," Vanessa whispered. The words felt different this time. Not defensive, not deflecting, just broken. Clara stepped closer. She looked at her sister carefully. The past flickered between them. Shared bedrooms as children, secrets whispered late at night, fights over borrowed clothes. Love had existed once. It hadn't vanished. It had been buried. "I forgive you," Clara said softly. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Why?" Clara inhaled slowly. "Because I don't want to carry this anymore." The truth surprised even her. Anger had once fueled her, but it had burned out. What remained wasn't rage. It was clarity. Vanessa began to cry openly. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," Clara replied gently. "But I deserve peace." Those were different things. Vanessa reached weakly for her hand. Clara hesitated for half a second, then took it. Not because the betrayal didn't matter, but because she had grown beyond it. Later, outside the room, Adrian stood waiting. She walked toward him slowly. "How are you?" he asked. Strangely calm. He studied her carefully. "Do you regret coming?" "No." She looked down the hallway. "She's alone. Her daughter is here. She's a child." Adrian understood without further explanation. "You're thinking about helping?" "Yes." He didn't immediately respond. He didn't tell her it was foolish or self-sacrificing. He simply asked, "Will it hurt you?" Clara considered. "No." Surprised her how true that felt. "I'm not doing it for her," she added quietly. "I'm doing it for me." He nodded. "Then I'll support you." She looked at him gratefully. "You always do." "Yes." No hesitation. No condition. Outside, the rain had slowed. The air felt cleaner. As they walked toward the exit, Clara realized something important. The accident that once nearly killed her had been born from betrayal. This accident, Daniel's, had been born from recklessness. Both moments could have hardened her. Instead, they clarified her. She wasn't the woman who ran blindly into traffic anymore. She was the woman who walked deliberately into a hospital room and chose forgiveness. Not because the past didn't matter, but because she refused to let it define her future. And as Adrian slipped his hand into hers, she knew something with certainty. The chapter with Daniel had ended. But the story of who she was becoming was far from over. The morning of Clara's wedding was quiet. Not chaotic. Not overwhelming. Just soft. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of her bedroom, spilling warm gold across the floor. The house, her house, felt different from the one she once shared with Daniel. This one carried no ghosts, only intention. Clara sat at her vanity while her stylist pinned the final pieces of her hair into place. Her dress hung on the closet door behind her. Ivory lace, simple but elegant, flowing gently instead of clinging. Nothing about today needed to prove anything. It just needed to feel true. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Clara called softly. The door opened slowly. Vanessa wheeled herself inside. Clara met her reflection in the mirror. For a moment, neither spoke. A year had passed since the accident. A year of surgeries. A year of rehabilitation. A year of hard conversations. Vanessa's paralysis had become permanent. But so had her humility. "You look beautiful," Vanessa said quietly. Clara turned in her chair to face her fully. "Thank you." Vanessa adjusted the small shawl over her shoulders. "I wasn't sure if I should come in." "You're my sister," Clara replied gently. "Of course you should." That hadn't been an easy journey. The first few months after Daniel's death had been complicated. Grief mixed with guilt. Shame mixed with regret. Clara had helped arrange the funeral, not for Daniel, but for her niece. She had stood beside Vanessa during hospital consultations. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she chose who she wanted to be moving forward. "You didn't have to invite me," Vanessa said softly. "Yes," Clara replied. "I did." Vanessa's eyes shimmered. "I never thought I'd see you happy like this." Clara smiled faintly. "Neither did I." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy. It wasn't strained. It was simply shared. Vanessa glanced at the dress again. He would have hated how peaceful you look. Clara raised an eyebrow. Daniel. Yes. Clara considered that. You're right. And for the first time, the mention of his name didn't hurt. It didn't ignite anger. It just existed as part of a closed chapter. Vanessa wheeled herself a little closer. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Clara stepped forward and knelt carefully in front of her sister. I forgave you, she said gently. But you also did the work. Vanessa blinked back tears. I didn't want to be the woman I became. You're not her anymore. And that was true. Pain had reshaped them both. But it hadn't destroyed them. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in a garden overlooking the water, the same place Clara and Adrian had once sat after a brutal court session. White chairs lined the aisle. Soft instrumental music drifted through the air. Friends who had remained loyal sat scattered throughout, smiling warmly as Clara appeared at the end of the aisle. She walked slowly, steadily, not because she was fragile, but because she was intentional. Adrian stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit. When his eyes met hers, something in his expression shifted. Not shock, not possession, gratitude. She reached him. They stood facing one another. No elaborate decorations, no grand audience, just honesty. The officiant spoke briefly about second chances, about rebuilding, about love that is chosen, not stumbled into. When it was time for vows, Adrian went first. I met you on the worst night of your life, he began. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the guests. But I never saw you as broken. His voice remained steady. I saw someone who refused to stay on the ground. Clara's throat tightened. You taught me that strength doesn't have to be loud, that dignity can exist even when everything else falls apart. He stepped closer. I don't promise you perfection. I don't promise you a life without difficulty. His eyes held hers firmly. But I promise you presence. Every time. Her heart swelled. Not from fireworks, but from certainty. When it was her turn, she inhaled slowly. I once believed love meant holding on no matter what, she said. A quiet hush fell over the garden. I believed loyalty meant enduring. She paused. I was wrong. She looked at him directly. Love is not endurance. It is choice. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. I choose you, not because you saved me, not because I needed you. Her voice softened. I choose you because you stood beside me when I could barely stand myself. A tear slipped down her cheek. You never rushed me. You never claimed me. You simply stayed. She reached for his hands. And I promised to stay too. The officiant smiled warmly. By the power vested in me. The words blurred slightly as Clara's emotions swelled. You may kiss the bride. The kiss was gentle, earned. The guests applauded softly. In the front row, Vanessa wiped tears from her cheeks. Not tears of regret this time. Tears of relief. At the reception, laughter replaced formality. Clara moved easily among the guests. No tension. No whispers. No scandal. Just celebration. She eventually made her way toward Vanessa's table. Are you comfortable? Clara asked. Vanessa nodded. I've never seen you glow like this. Clara smiled. It feels different. How? It doesn't feel fragile. Vanessa looked thoughtful. I spent so long thinking passion was loud. Clara squeezed her hand gently. Peace is louder than people realize. Across the room, Adrian was laughing with a friend. He caught Clara's eye, smiled. That small exchange said more than anything spoken. Later, as the evening quieted and guests began to leave, Clara and Adrian stepped away briefly toward the water. The same water that once heard her fears after court. The same place where something between them first shifted. You okay? He asked softly. Yes. She looked out over the dark waves. A year ago, I walked into a hospital thinking my life had ended. He slipped his arm around her waist gently. And now, she turned toward him. Now I know it was beginning. He kissed her temple lightly. I'm glad I didn't leave that night. So am I. They stood there quietly. No rush, no fear, no unfinished business. Just two people who had chosen each other with open eyes. Behind them, Vanessa watched from her wheelchair, her niece standing beside her, not as a symbol of past betrayal, but as proof of something stronger. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened, but it transformed it. Clara leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder. I used to think being hit by that car was the worst thing that ever happened to me. He raised an eyebrow slightly. And now, she smiled softly. It forced me to stop running. The waves crashed steadily against the shore. Not violent, not destructive, just constant, like love should be. And this time, it stayed. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.